Dumela Mzansi, and welcome to the Social Justice Lab, the platform where it may seem like it's about a lot of things, but we assure you, it's just society. Today, we're joined in studio by the man, the myth, the legend, Professor Sethugelo Matebesi from the University of the Free State. Professor Matebesi is a lecturer of political science at the university, and I'll just let it come from the horse's mouth, Doc. Prof, please tell us about how your interest in politics took shape.
Yeah, good. It's a privilege to be here today. It's a very strange way that I started. I'm actually a sociologist, so sociology is about everything. We study politics, we study education, religion, and all that. So how I ended up, I took political sociology as one of my majors, but I got involved in political commentary in the media around about 2017 or 19, years 2017, when we started doing studies on these protests, community protests, one newspaper interview, and then it led to television. And since then, I haven't looked back. That's how I got involved, because one interview after the other, very time consuming, but it's something that I really like. I'm very passionate about what I'm doing. So that's how overall I became, in short, I became involved in political analysis.
No, we really appreciate that, Doc, because Prof, because it's not very often that you can get such a validated stance on matters of politics. Most times it's from someone who's trying to push one interest or the other. So we're very happy to have you here because you're going to be as subjective as you can. So please tell us a little bit more about the research findings that you had with the protests. What are some of the most interesting things that you found there?
Yeah, I must say, and I hope I'll also get an opportunity to speak about the challenges of doing this kind of work. But I remember in 2006, it was still early days, when most South Africans did not understand. We know South Africa is actually regarded as the capital city of protest. We had a very violent past in South Africa. We protest the 1980s industrial-related protest, even in our communities. But it was quite a huge surprise for many. Even why are your predominantly black community still protesting against their own? And that was a bit of a phenomena that not many of us understood. So we got funding from a center, it's a think tank in Johannesburg, the Center for Development Enterprise. I'm a research associate at the Center for Development Support at the University of the Free State, and that's how I got involved. So we got a subcontract from the CDX about Eastern Cape. So that's how we got involved, and it was quite interesting to find out what are the causes of these protests, and based on that, I think we gained traction. We were also involved in a study in Gauteng. Gauteng, it's in Gauteng. It was a cross-boundary where Gauteng was demarcated into Northwest, but the people of Gauteng did not want to become part of Northwest. We're talking about the implications of belonging to a province far off. If you have to apply, now you need to travel from Mafikeng and all that. Very violent protest. And at that stage, you had to go into that community at the height of the protest. That's as expert witness to say at that stage, the government did not properly consult the community of Hutsong, because that was one of the requirements of the demarcation process. You need to consult your community's public participation. And on the basis of that, I think we just gained traction, and that led to me now following that as my specialty area. I did studies in Kuruman. Some of us predicted something is going to happen in Jagersfontein because of the things of happening there. So out of that project, I've already written 2 books. The first book was called Civil Strife Against Local Government. So that book and that project indicated, no, it's not only about service delivery. In your so-called mining towns, it is all about the conflict between the mining company and the community that also fuels these community protests or foments them. And then that led to a second book called Social Licensing and Mining in South Africa, which was published in 2020. And another angle, and I call them research streams, that emanated from that particular research was that I found out that, but it's quite strange, that another factor that, causes these protests is that some of these core leaders of the protest are being offered incentives by whoever, either the mining company or even by state authorities, whether the local government, national or regional, to try and mute them. But the problem with that is you're creating a vicious cycle of protest. That's why even now I can tell you there are areas where these protests will never end, because people will always tell, no, I also want to be like Ndate Mang Mang, because they got a job, they got tenders on the basis, but wanted to be very careful. So, because sometimes you cannot pinpoint to say somebody got, a job or a tender on the basis of being a protest leader. But I've got evidence. I published an article on this about the Vicksburg situation. I'm going there again next week, following up 10 years after Datan is dead, where somebody just said loyalty does not pay. A hungry stomach does not know any allegiance. And some of these protest leaders will tell me, but they did not get involved in the protest in vain. That's why they took that. So there is evidence of that. So my third book, I'm tracing throughout South Africa, where does these protest leaders end up? Where do they end up? And the notion that I have of, and I call it transactional activism, what does it imply for South Africa?
Prof, that's the very intriguing stuff that you just mentioned there, Doc. Prof, I mean, one of the things that you said that's very interesting is that South Africa is almost like the capital city of protest. Indeed, that is the only language that people know, that they feel like they'll be heard. When you go among communities, the sentiment is the only way that they'll hear us is protest. We tried this and that, attending in Bezos. What's your stance on that, Doc? Prof, would you say that protest is an effective means to bring about change?
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult to respond to that question. But fact of the matter is that protest is part of our DNA. In South Africa, protest, it's part of our democratic process. And when people are protesting, that is actually by demonstrating and exercise. When we like, for instance, the students who are protesting and now disrupting classes, becoming violent. And the question is, but what is the aim of a protest? It's the same whether it's now industrial protests, employees protesting, breaking down facilities, community protesting. And it's the same what happened in Hutsong. They burned down where they need to pay for their services, buy electricity. And then later on they had to travel to town, pay 20 rand And some people can only, at that stage, could only afford maybe a 10 rand worth of electricity. Now you have to spend 20 rand on transportation to go and buy electricity in town. It's this kind of things where I strongly believe that protests become a problem. Your question about that is the only language. Now it simply means that it seems as if there's only a response when something happens. Tires are being burnt and all that. And I also, through the more than 30 case studies that I've done throughout South Africa, there's also credible evidence that that these communities can show. We've tried to engage with your state, local representatives, and unfortunately, it's not about responding positively to their request, but it's about responding where there's been no response. And in such instances, and especially if you meet a granny and tell you that, look, I can even lose my life, but of democracy is this, I'm prepared to die. So in such instances, you will understand where these communities are coming from. But in most instances, we encourage people, exercise your democratic right, but let us also exercise it responsibly. But then it becomes very problematic because people will always tell you when you come with such a narrative, but from whose perspective are you coming? Or do you want to dictate how we should interrogate or respond to this problem? And I could just very briefly give you an example. I could not understand why the residents in Kuruman, there's 22 villages around, and the mines did give money to the municipality to tar one section of a road. The money just disappeared. And these are not dumb suck things. It's based on young people. And I was surprised when I went there, made up an appointment. On arrival, it was matured, elderly, great, middle-aged people, and 22 of them. And I asked them, but why are you using your children as bargaining for power against the state? And they told me, you are from Bloemfontein, you've got facilities, we don't have any facilities to burn down. Now, I would say those people are naive, but from the states where it never even happened, not even during the time of apartheid, where you will find that the parents forcefully actually kept their own children out of school. So it just tells you to the extent to which we can go. And sometimes it's difficult to understand, but the situation on the ground.
To speak on other means of power, perhaps, which have been advertised to citizens as this is a means where you can take back your power. One of those means primarily is voting, right? So with the up-and-coming elections, I'd just like to focus our discussion on the political background. I'm sure you can speak on that too. So, but just as an icebreaker to this conversation, I want to ask, what are some of the red flags, as the youth calls it, that you can look out for?
For me, red flags comes from, and it happened now recently, when you've got leaders who comes out, because sometimes our leaders are being also swept by emotions, the moment, but they don't realize that they've got a greater responsibility. I mean, once you're in a public eye, you've got a greater responsibility and you need to act accordingly. And all the times where one party said, but well, if it's you are prepared to kill. Now, what kind of political party is that who has ambitions to take over from the ruling party? I mean, you can't have situations like that. We all know as South African citizens what is right and what is wrong. And that for me will be a red flag if you've got a party with leaders publicly promoting violence and chaos, because the question is, once they become questionable characters, and this is something about South Africa, we've got too many leaders, and I've wrote an opinion piece which appeared on Saturday in the independent online newspaper, that perhaps one thing that we have forgotten was to cut or shut down. We went to Codesa, but what we forgot was to say, hey, how do we act responsibly. And that's why too many of our leaders, judges even, we had 2 judges recently which had to be impeached. A situation like this 30 years after democracy. So I strongly believe that, and if I say this, I don't label any judgment because look, no one has been found guilty in a court of law. But fact of the matter is we can't have situations like that. That tells you that something is wrong. But the problem is we have too many young people. Very encouraging, very commendable that the IEC have been declaring and informing South Africans that we've got the largest proportion of young citizens who have registered. But the question is, are we going to see the national radio station to say the moment you talk about politics, people will say, I don't want to get involved there because they associate things, and that it should not be like that. Politics should not be, it's perhaps the current leaders and across the political party that have created the situation, but it's up to us citizens to have a pushback. When I say this, I don't say I will never come out and tell people which party to vote. It's up to them. But as long as we exercise our democratic vote, right, because we still have a very low voter turnout in South Africa, which is very worrying. About we complain and all that. Many people across many countries do not have this privilege to be able to vote. Sometimes the things that we say, like now, I think it's one of the benefits of our democracy. Where in another country, I think by now the soldiers would have been standing outside if this was a live broadcast. And we don't realize that we actually very privileged.
I just want to get an understanding from you as a person who understands this stuff deeper than your average South African. Which political party would you say had the most to gain from providing good service delivery to the people, from actually doing the work well? Which would you say has the most to gain from that?
Yeah, it's a difficult question because it's,
you don't want to say any names.
No, I'm never shy to, because then I would have to live doing this like this now forever, because I think we've got a greater responsibility. But the African National Congress, the problem with the ANC, and I'm going to say it's not the ANC as such, it's the people, it's the current leaders. The ANC has been infiltrated. Certain things have become so normalized within the ANC. And I can tell you that this whole notion of, no, it's not business as usual, it's business as usual. Where, it's sad. People don't realize what damage we are doing to this country. We do have the Democratic Alliance, which have demonstrated that they can do things right. I strongly believe that the ANC can also do things right, but the environment within, there are too many crooks. Let us not go in, because what else can you describe somebody who does not have a conscience to say, but if I take this 50 million and put it there in the private pockets, it's things like that. So it's a very difficult question, but I strongly believe that the current government does have, but the problem is too many people has become accustomed to taking shortcuts. I can tell you now, as the chief executive officer of the country, the president, if he wakes up and say, from today, if I hear in any municipality that there's been wrongdoing, yes, it will be investigated. Oh, we have some improvement. The Auditor General comes and say 60 billion. It's unaccounted. You know what does that mean? It simply means that you can't trace. There's no evidence. There had to be a receipt. If I got an advance of 100 rand from the university, there had to be a receipt. And if I go out and I go a packet of sweets, which is allowed, it's subsistence, there had to be a receipt. But I can't now go and buy a newspaper. They will scratch it out and say, Ntate Matebesi, sorry, you need to pay this back. And I don't say universities does not have trouble. A lot of things happen there. But deduct it from your salary without any even asking you. Even before you get the money, there's a form that you sign. That is proper governance. And the question is, how does a municipality, how does a state entity continue where you can't find a paper trail, evidence of how money has been spent? It's a huge insult to South African citizens. And then you come and tell us, oh, there's been an improvement in terms of our financial, the auditor report. Nonsense. R1 that is missing that cannot be accounted is tax money. There should be consequences against the chief financial officer and whoever have been involved. They should be answerable, Otherwise, no. And that's why I strongly believe sometimes that for 3 or 5 years, and when you talk like that, it seems as if you're very brutal, you're arrogant and all that, and it's not like that. We need to start to be very, very honest and robust about the things that happen. We need to build more prisons for all the crooks that is defrauding the state. So for me, in short, we've got too many good leaders, many of them. But the problem is they have been silenced. If you want to follow the proper route, they silence you. They just work you out, or you will be there, you will never be promoted. These are the kind of things that happen, very unfortunate. So for me, I strongly believe in the capability of the African National Congress-led government. But the problem is, when are they going to get the basics right? They struggle with that. There's a lot of good things that is happening in our country. There's a lot of them. But I strongly believe that we do have the capability to do the basics and do them right. But there are also too many of the African National Congress. But you've got parties like the Democratic Alliance also there that I strongly believe can play a role.
Prof, I hear that, Prof. That's a very insightful thing, especially what you said about the prison things. I hope we'll get some time to come and retouch on that, because that's a very interesting one there. So I understand that you feel the African National Congress is a viable machine for bringing development in the country. With that being said, do you feel like our democracy would be bolstered by a stronger competition? Perhaps, in the market, for example, in the private market, we avoid monopolies by introducing stronger competition, right? So in the political scene, do you feel like the ruling party will see a formidable political opponent anytime soon?
The moment the ANC gets pressure at the ballot box, we will see wonders. We will take action against, but that doesn't happen. I strongly believe that would have been a completely different South Africa today if that was the case. And we now know, and I've heard some people say, the presence of ACT as a new party, and even Umkhonto Sizwe, MK, it's not a threat to the African National Congress. For me, it's a huge threat. And not in terms of electoral support. Remember, you've got parties that they can disrupt the status quo, they can cause confusion. I've never seen a new party that emerged in South Africa that has gained so much traction like MK. I mean, I was at a court the other day in terms of their marketing. So these parties, they can cause a lot of confusion, and that can lead to lower voter turnout. And we all know lower voter turnout hurts the ruling party. But it's not only about the ANC. These parties can hurt the opposition. And I strongly believe that we've got a highly fragmented opposition politics in South Africa. For me, opposition politics was much stronger when Mmusi Maimane was in the Democratic Alliance. There was a concerted effort towards unity between these parties. But now the DA, with its so-called social pack, almost showing like a strong arm tactic there, which I think have alienated some political parties, but they're highly fragmented, and that's where I think it works to the advantage of the African National Congress, because they can tap onto that. So it's still, but for the very first time, you've got two senior former politicians who have been part of the ANC who are now contesting against the ANC. And I'm a sociologist. I take note of the things perhaps that people normally will not. So it's something that the Magashule mentioned during the early days of ACT, to say they know how the IEC operates, but that once again also gives you insight into how our leaders operate, because what does that mean? So when you're on the other side of the fence, it's fine to do things that is not right, and now you are on the other side. Now suddenly you want to take the public into confidence. It doesn't work like that. That's why I say politics changes like a rainbow. Today they say this, tomorrow something, not even tomorrow, after 5 minutes. It's completely different. And even as we speak, you don't know what I'm planning. Just below my waist. That's the nature. That's how brutal politics has become. So, but for me, know how to work, and even if they know that they're gonna lose the battle, they have means to cause confusion, because people will say they know which narrative. And look now, MK won 3 cases. What does that mean? But I know that people will not now necessarily flock to MK on the basis of that. I can tell you now, South Africans has pretty much made up their mind who they are going to vote for. So irrespective of what is going to happen, rallies and all that, there will be a few people that perhaps will be encouraged to go and vote, motivated to go and vote. But it's not a case that if a major scandal happens tomorrow, that people will now vote. No, South Africans haven't reached that stage. We still idealize our leaders irrespective of how tainted they are. And that is very unfortunate, because we need to punish these leaders and their parties for these wrongs, so that they come back at another stage much stronger and do the right thing. But if we keep on doing that, the status quo will remain.
You know, Prof, a while ago we had the chairperson of the EFF in the Free State here, and he also made a similar point that the IEC, you know, there's some questionable stuff going on there. There's Julius Malema, made the claim that these new political parties, MK, Rise SA, Action SA, are there to segment the black vote, so that the black vote doesn't go to one or other political party that could, you know, then make some changes for black people. To what extent do you think it's true that the introduction of all these new political parties are there to segment the black vote?
Yeah, I don't know which party will, because if you've got such ambitions, then it's at another level. Where you form a party because you want to cause, it's a tall order. Because remember, if you form a political party, it's not easy. It looks quite rosy, but I don't think so. I don't think so. And one thing that it's quite commendable, whether we've got 6,000 political parties, although it doesn't make sense to me, but still, it's commendable. It's a democratic right that people are using, and so we should encourage that, as long as people don't go the other route of using violence to promote their ideas. But I can't buy into that parties have been formed to, that could be because they formed to do that. Because the question will also apply to the EFF. When it was formed, was that the goal or the idea of the EFF to do that? I don't think so. So I don't agree with that statement, because if that is the case, then I think these party leaders or whoever formed these parties are shooting themselves in the foot, and they're wasting their time in any case. Yeah.
So you think it's somewhat of a conspiracy theory that there are certain funding certain political organizations to further their interests. Do you think that's a conspiracy, or is there some truth to that sentiment?
Yeah, I will not say the open aim as naturally, but that's a natural thing all over the world, where you will find that companies, business, wealthy people will fund like-minded, but parties that slightly speaks to what they want, and that can be a threat to a party that I think might be a stumbling block to their ideals. For instance, I can't see why would that family conspiracy theory. These are the things that happens, but not only in South Africa, all over the world, where business companies, even international organizations will fund.
Let's understand this properly, Prof. You're saying that those families, the affluent families, are funding political parties as the result of them standing for their interests. And it's not a matter of these families are saying, look, start a political party.
That is now something different, because look, if a starts a party, then sure, well, that's now a completely different situation, where it could be possible, but I don't also want to grab straws and trying to comment on things which I don't think it's, I don't understand what will be the situation there. If it happens, it can happen with one political party, where a family will approach an individual and say, hey, we've got the funding. But how are they going to sustain that? That is it. But I strongly believe that companies, families, affluent families will fund an existing political party, whereas a new party, and said, oh, well, their manifesto, their ideals speaks to what we want in South Africa, then they will perhaps align themselves in terms of funding, supporting. Far-fetched of me to now say they initiate parties, because sure, well, they will have to start forming parties on the eve of every election, because remember, politicians are not people that can maintain certain credibility for a long time. They might change along the course, and perhaps it's a case where there's a new party and they became aware of the party's manifesto, ideals, what the party stands for, and then a decision is made to say, let us fund.
Okay, Doc, that's very clear. So on that, based on the socioeconomic standing of the community, they would be better represented by certain parties? Or do you feel that there's a party that genuinely looks out for the needs of all South Africans universally?
No, I don't have any comment on that. To promote a situation where I say people should vote for, because this is what I will be doing, for party X. But if you want to now compare political parties, we all know what these different political parties stand for. And sometimes it's easy for these opposition parties outside of government to make all these comments while not in government. And they will realize that. But what I can't understand, and I just don't understand this country sometimes. Why can't, because we've got capable banks in South Africa. Now coming to that, I can only speak to issues which really I just don't think that actually it's taking us 60 years back. You've got a ministry of higher education with funding, but they keep on creating layers and layers. Nobody who can just tell all these people to bugger up. No, really, I mean, there's no other kind of language that I can use just to, because I don't understand what's going on there. Now there is students directly. What is so difficult? Now, if you can't even do that, now what else? How are we going to manage all these major infrastructural things? Because the problem with South Africans is that the moment if they hear the budget, then already the eyes is how much of that money needs to be diverted. And for me, I don't understand how can it be so difficult to pay out money to students? I mean, there's been a budget a year before, and also, I mean, the financial year ends in February. Now, they should be planning for the next year. How many applications did you see? And the money is reserved. Come on. Surely, what can be so problematic by the end of March that money can be paid out? In this age of technology, what is the problem? You know, and that's where, and that for me, it's something that sometimes, you know, it really gets to you to say, but what's going on here? And sometimes we also have to be careful what we say, because maybe it's also lack of understanding. In this age of technology, that should be at least one of our least problems. But it is because, and it's not because what is the problem? Because this is something created somewhere, another layer, and don't be surprised within a year or two if another layers are again built into the system to mess up everything. It's these kind of things that I think messes up our democracy and all that. We are in a highly privileged position, because if you look at the things that we have, very dynamic, our achievements and all that, if you look internationally, how we are making inroads. But there are a few things that I don't understand. It's load shedding. What happened now? And what is going to happen on the 30th of May? Now, when you start talking about these kind of things, then you're counter-revolutionary. No, you're not counter-revolutionary, because we had to be consistent, because it's not about the air, it's what's happening out there. Politics are being appraised anywhere in the world. And some people who are involved in this thing will not like what we're talking about that. And that's why the ones that know to you and say, hey, thank you for the kind of work that you're doing. Those are people that embraces these critiques, that can go back and go and improve. And we are not also perfect as we speak, but I strongly believe that the moment if we do the basics right, and try to reach a compromise whenever there are differences, I strongly believe those are the leaders that will build their party, but also build South Africa.
Yeah. You know, Prof, I feel like there's a lot that's been said here, and it's been a very productive conversation in that we've covered a lot in this time that we've been allocated here. So I just want to figure out, Prof, like, to what extent does that influence the development of our country?
We all know and I don't want to often say people, we should not racialize our debates, but I put forward a better picture. But we all know that we've got much fewer whites in South Africa than blacks. But we can just imagine if a miracle happened, because I've also been posing these questions to white communities, if they suddenly wake up and say, now we're going full force to go and vote. The question is, people do not realize that. And I think people think that once you voted, it's a waste of your time because nothing happened. The democracy that we have is because of the will of the people. And I don't think many people realize that particular power that lies with them. And it's only when they realize that perhaps one day they will stand up. People that do have power, because on the basis of the numbers of people that have voted for Party X will get representation in Parliament. It's amazing what they have achieved with that limited number of people. I mean, sometimes when they speak, you have to listen. So that just shows you, and on who took them to Parliament, the voters. So the same can happen. Now we've got independent, capable of leading us in this particular area. Will he or she bring changes? But she, on his or her own, will not be able to be a representative in your provincial legislature. It's all through the ballot paper, and that's where the power lies. be very patient with the process, but I strongly believe that we do have power, and that is the right to vote, and that can bring changes in this country.
I'm very glad that you pointed that out, Prof. That's the only language. Protest is the only language.
Yeah.
But throughout this conversation, I think you've made it very clear that voting is also a very viable means to be heard. So I really did want to go back to this the protest things, and I wanted to go back to that point that you wanted to make about this line of work and how it's been for you. But in the interest of time, I think we're going to have to save that for another episode. Just to close off, Prof, what maybe they're approaching the ballot for the first time, maybe it's a first-time voter, perhaps it's a citizen who isn't as informed as you are in the game of politics and how genuine everything is. Now, of course, without campaigning for any particular party, what are some of the things that the voter should consider? What piece of advice would you want them to have after listening to this?
Or posters also, and now you refer to very briefly to what is happening at a voter stations when you go and vote. But I've also noted generally just posters being torn down and all that. That is a serious criminal. In as much as it is your democratic right, there are certain rules and regulations. The first one is that once you enter, they become. No one can rush you, and no one should dictate to you who to vote for, even at that stage. So we're going to have a very long ballot paper with the names, and the ballot paper normally starts in an alphabetical path. That is a strategic move to have a name that starts with A because your name is up first. But people should relax, read through, and only make one X. They should not be in a hurry if they don't understand. Look at the ballot paper and just ensure that that X is made within that little space that has been made there. But you can, and in the stage, you will vote for the province, and you will also vote for your national representative. So you will get perhaps two ballot papers. I don't know in the case of independent whether there will be three, but this is as far as what I know. So this are some of the things that needs to happen. Be calm, but also respect the officials in that voting station, because there might be consequences for you if you don't comply with the regulations at the voting stations. But as I've indicated, the 29th is no longer a secret. It's that we all have an appointment with what I would say the spirit of people like Nelson Mandela, people who've lost their life for what we're enjoying today, and it's upon us to do right by them by going and.
Incredible. And I feel like our viewers are going to see this and come out of it deeper thinkers in the sociological landscape. So thank you very much for joining us today.
It's an absolute privilege, a very extremely busy time.
In the Social Justice Lab, where it may appear as if it's about everything, but we guarantee you, it's just society.